You got Maga Mac here with you on Birds 365. We've got Ed Kracz with us, Johnny's running partner from Sports Illustrated. Eddie K, earlier this week, the Eagles contingent was out at the owners' meetings. Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni all spent time talking to the media. What was the most important thing you heard? Something that will have relevance, good or bad, going forward with the Eagles from either the coach, the general manager, or the owner?
Well, I thought it was interesting to hear Nick Sirianni kind of admit they're not done adding at the offensive line position, which kind of opens up a whole ball of wax as far as will the Eagles go with an offensive lineman in the first round or a cornerback, which everybody seems to want. A lot of people are mock drafting the Eagles to pick a cornerback and maybe try to move up for one. But Nick Sirianni saying that we still need to add at that position, I guess wasn't so much of a surprise as it was that it was an admission that they need to do more. And it's kind of dried up in free agency, I think. I'm not sure what's out there. Dalton Reisner is still a capable guard, but he was available last year, and the Eagles didn't bring him in. So I think we need to keep our eyes open that, I know you were talking about receivers being kind of maybe an underrated piece to what they need here in the draft. But I think O-line, as deep as that position is in the first round, if you're sitting there at 22 and there's a lineman that you really like on the offensive side of the ball, I think the Eagles could possibly grab him. So that's kind of what stuck out to me was next.
Let me double down on that for you.
Yeah.
There are two type of offensive linemen, at least in my book. And I know flexibility is a key, but Stoutland is also on record as saying, when I change one, I'd prefer not to change another. I want to have to make two moves and change two different guys. When you say offensive lineman, you're talking interior, outside. Are we talking guard, center, or are we talking tackle?
Yeah, it's hard to spend that kind of pick, a 22nd overall pick maybe on the interior of the offensive line, although, guards are starting to get paid now. We saw Landon Dickerson land a big deal here. We've seen some other guards get some pretty sizable contracts during free agency. So maybe, kind of like the running back position was undervalued and we saw teams start to pay some running backs. Maybe guards are getting into that stratosphere as well, but I'm not sure that would be a good expenditure. So I would think it would probably be a tackle who can play guard, kind of like Tyler Steen, who I don't think they want to start him. I think they want to use him.
They downplayed him, Ed. I was surprised. That's as close as Nick Sirianni will get to say, yeah, he's not ready. He didn't say that, but the way he was talking, that's the way it came off to me.
Right. I think they value him more as a kind of a reserve, kind of like a Jack Driscoll type, that super reserve that can kind of step in and, if an injury happens in game or, if you're going to be without somebody for a couple of weeks, I think that's kind of how they view him. So I prefer to take a tackle that can, learn how to play guard. J.C. Latham, the kid from the University of Alabama, I think is a perfect example of someone that, he's got a guard type, body and a build and an ability, but he projects as a tackle. But I think he could be a guy that you could draft that you can cross train. And I think you can do that with, a few other guys in the draft too. And Stoutland's one of the best at doing that. So, I don't think you would go with a guy like Zach Frazier, the West Virginia kid who I love and came to mind when you guys were talking about NCAA wrestling versus the other wrestling.
The real stuff.
The real stuff. I mean, Zach Frazier is a 4-time state wrestling champion. I love guys like that. I think, the wrestling skill set translates to football and vice versa better than any other sport out there. But, I don't think you would take that type of player who really just kind of projects as a center and maybe you can play him at guard. Same with the kid from Oregon, Jackson Powers Johnson, I think his name is.
He's the guy, the 3 first names, Jackson, or the 3 last names, Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah.
He's the one guy who I look at because he can play center, he can play guard. Would you consider? But I'm with you. I think the Eagles, their thought process is the other way. So I'm trying to figure out which of the 3, Tyler Guyton, Amarius Mims, and J.C. Latham, can play guard the best early on. And you're probably right. It's probably Latham, right, of those 3?
I would say, yeah. I mean, obviously he'll need to work at it, and he'll be a work in progress at guard because I think he's mostly a tackle, played mostly tackle, I think, at Alabama. But yeah, I think he projects as someone that can go in there and play guard for you, and then maybe get him ready to take over for whenever that day Lane Johnson retires, or not. Find Lane Johnson's retirement in a year or two, depending on how long Lane has left. But there's another guy, that Fatanow guy, Troy Fatanow.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a pretty good prospect too.
I don't think he's going to be there, though. I think those three, that's the reason I put those three names up there. I think they have a shot to be there at 22. And which one, I'm trying to figure out which one of those three can better handle playing guard, because I think you're right. I don't think they want to draft a guy at 22 who's going to sit behind Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata for 2 years.
Right.
I've been
telling you that for months, John.
Yeah, but I think that's the plan. The plan is to start him at right guard and then kick him out to right tackle when Lane eventually retires. I think that's the goal. And I keep landing on Guyton because 2 reasons. One, Lane loves him and Lane's mentoring him. And that happened with, it even goes further than Jason Kelce and Cam Jurgens. Jason Kelce just loved Cam Jurgens as a prospect. He wasn't mentoring him. Lane's actually mentoring this kid. And, if they believe he can play guard, he's a natural right tackle. That's what he played in college. I think that's a perfect fit. I just don't know if he can play guard.
I think it's all a projection. Yeah. Even for someone like Latham, I mean, I think it's all projection. Can they play guard at this next level? The Eagles are going to have to feel comfortable with it. They're going to rely on the input of Jeff Stoutland.
He knows.
Yeah, he know. He'll know. But that's what makes it so intriguing. I don't know if Guyton can do it, but maybe. Same with Latham. I don't know if he can do it, but maybe. Maybe you do trade up. Maybe, how he's traded up in 4 of the last 5 drafts, right? So you got to think that he's going to be working the phones and he's going to try to do it again. And, what's he going to come up for? Is he going to come up for a cornerback, like maybe a Quinion Mitchell or
that's who I think they're going to, if they go the targeted trade up route, Ed, which they have done, as you mentioned, a lot in the past few years, I think it would be for Quinion Mitchell. I think that would be the guy. But they might have to go up pretty high, not 22 to 20. They might have to go up 22 to 15. That's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, you're right. That's a pretty big jump, and you don't know what it would cost them. They do have those 2 second-round picks to play with. They'd probably obviously have to part with one of those, and maybe Howie would do that. But my contention with the cornerbacks is everybody's talking about them, and yeah, I get it. You want to have somebody to come in here and be ready, but you still have James Bradberry, who they seem intent on sticking with at this point. You have Keely Ringo, who they really, really like, who could become a starter on the outside. And I know Slay's older, but Slay is still playing at a pretty high level. You'd like to maybe give him some reps off during the course of a season to kind of manage his play, like they've done with Brandon Graham. Obviously, they wouldn't do that to Slay as far as limiting him to 20 snaps like they do with Graham, but you'd like to see someone come in maybe and take some snap load off him, and maybe that's why cornerback gets a lot of mention, and plus they gave up 35 touchdown passes last year. So obviously there's something to taking a cornerback, but man, they haven't done it in so long, and I know they wanted to in the past when they wanted to get J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain when they were there a couple of years ago. They just got picked before they were able to get up high enough to grab one, but they haven't taken one since 2002 with Lito Shepherd. That's a long.
When was the last time they took a guard with a first-round pick?
Danny Watkins back in 2011.
Oh yeah, let's repeat that immediately. Let's put that to the top of the to-do list. Let's get ourselves another Danny Watkins. Yeah, go Birds.
Well, you have to investigate the background and make sure there's no firefighting.
Or Jackson Powers Johnson shouldn't pay for the sins of Danny Watkins, but sometimes
and listen, Danny Watkins just didn't have the passion for the game, as it turned out. And that's
Gotta love ball, Ed.
Yeah, right. So, just because you take a guard doesn't mean, oh my gosh, he's going to be the next Danny Watkins. But you do have to look at their background and see if they do love ball. Do they love guys that love ball? So if those guys don't love ball, they're not coming here. So but John's right. I wouldn't penalize Jackson Powers Johnson or Zach Frazier or Graham Barton.
Well, yeah, I am penalizing, but one, and the previous one before that was, so there's been one more corner than taken. Which was first, Watkins or Lito? You got to go back how many more years to take cornerback. I think there's a much better chance at taking a cornerback than a guard. And I get it. If he's a tackle / guard, that they're going to move back out, that changes the math a little bit, but not a whole hell of a lot. If you're planning on starting a guy next year at guard because you don't think Tyler Steen is good enough to step in, then you're drafting him as a guard.
Yeah, but here's why here's why I don't like looking back at any team, not just the Eagles. And they haven't taken a cornerback since this. They haven't taken an
linebacker since Jerry Robinson. We all know the guys.
And on and on and on. Guard since Danny Watkins. Cornerback since Lito. They would have taken J.C. Horn if they had the opportunity. They would have taken Christian McCaffrey if they had the opportunity. Other teams are involved, 31 other teams, and sometimes you don't get the player you want. And sometimes it's a player at that particular position. They seem to have been wanting to get a cornerback for years now. So I think it's more in the realm because they know they have to replace Darius Slay at some point. They're honest about JB having a poor season, as James Bradberry would be the first to tell you that. He's very accountable. So I think they do want a corner, but if one is not there, if Quinyon Mitchell's the guy you like and he's not there, well, you're going to go in a different direction.
Fans always like to see, the first round picks come in and play and start right away. And I just don't think that happens with a cornerback. I think a cornerback comes in and probably sits, depending again on what you do with Bradberry. But, Keely Ringo.
A lot of good ones recently. Surtain, Sauce Gardner, Jody's guy. A lot of good ones recent. Because I used to have that thought about corners. I used to go, oof, that's a difficult position to play right away.
But do you think they would come in and start right away? I mean, given how this roster looks right now, do you think if you took Quinyon Mitchell, he comes in and boom?
Well, I think if you get Quinyon Mitchell, I think they cut James Bradberry. And I think, he's starter day one. Now, there's going to be hiccups. I don't think he's going to be Sauce Gardner. But J.C. Horn said now he had an injury, but he was playing very well as well. So a lot of the younger corner, I think the game has changed so much that there's so many good receivers and good corners because all they do is throw at the college level, spread. So you got good coverage guys, you got good receivers, and maybe they're a little bit more prepared to play than they have been in the past, I think.
And if you're right, Ed, and the Eagles are right, you said you think the Eagles like Keely Ringo a lot. It's a competition. Throw them both out there. May the best man win. Whoever outperforms the other preseason and like in practice, that's your starter opening day. If James Bradberry is elsewhere, and I'm with John too, that if they draft a cornerback in the first round, it's only till June 1st, and then Bradberry is gone. They will release Bradberry. They'll try and trade him, but nobody's going to trade for him. So they'll end up having to release him. I got no problem with that. You think that's a little too much of a gamble to move off Bradberry to start either your first round draft pick and or Keely Ringo?
I kind of do. Yeah.
Really?
I think unless it's like John said, one of these top like Surtain or, the other guy you mentioned for the Jets, Sauce Gardner. I mean, if it's one of those guys, then maybe you feel better about it. But I haven't seen Quinyon Mitchell play. I've seen a few clips of him on tape, like he played at Toledo. I know he's got all the traits, but man, it's a big ask for a rookie to come in here and be a day one starter. And Bradberry's done it. He didn't do it very well last year, but maybe the Eagles believe that there's a reason for it, and they're going to take a big bath on that contract no matter when they cut him. Would they be willing to do it? I don't know. I mean, he's a veteran voice in that locker room, stand-up guy, very likable guy in the locker room, probably in the front office too. I'm not so sure I would cut him, June 1st if they go and take a Quinion Mitchell or a Terrian Arnold or somebody like that in the draft. I don't like starting rookie cornerbacks in the league. I think it's a position you have to grow into. And maybe that's what they would do. They would keep him, and whoever they take in the first round, if it's one of those corners, then they kind of intersperse him, give him some snaps with Bradberry and Slay. And if he's playing well, then maybe he starts to win the job as the season goes along. But coming out of training camp, day one starter, that's a lot to ask for a rookie cornerback, I think.
I admit I am intrigued with James Bradberry and Vic Fangio's defense. I mean, he's a pure zone corner. I think Vic is smart enough to leave him at right corner, leave him alone. He's not going to move him into the slot like Goopy Sean Desai. He's not going to move him off to the other cornerback when Slay goes down. He's going to say, this is your job. He plays cover 2, cover 4, cover 6, all the Fangio bullshit zone coverages. That's what he does well. I'm intrigued. I think he's going to have a bounce back season if he gets to the season. But if the Eagles draft a corner, I don't think he's getting to the season. So I'm kind of torn on that.
I kind of agree. I think, but where I disagree would be if the Eagles draft a corner, I think he still could get to the season. I don't think they're just going to part ways with him. I'll tell you this: if he gets cut, he's not going to be free very long. I know when the Giants released him, he was kind of hanging out there for a little while until the Eagles were able to come to a deal with him. But I would suspect he'd be a pretty popular pickup. A veteran corner, just 2 years removed from being an all-pro player. I would think there would be a market for him. And I don't, Howie says it all the time. We're not in the mode of giving up on good players. And I think they still think James Bradberry is a good player.
All right, Eddie, I asked this of Damo yesterday because I was on The Athletic. They were going back and doing reevaluation of drafts last year, and the Eagles were one of 32 that they went back and reevaluated with a year in the books. We give Howie a lot of credit. The Howie season, certainly free agency is, and the draft is too, because he likes to shake and move up and down. How would you rate A through F, A plus through F, Howie's draft last year with the 2023 Eagles selections?
Well, I don't usually like to judge a draft class for
after 1 year, right?
After 1 year, I get it.
Ahead of time, this is up to change. We'll 5 years down the road look back and go, here's a definitive grade because everybody got their chance. We found out who couldn't play, whose game rose. So it's a snapshot just after 1 year look. You can do it, but you leave yourself the option to change it at a future date, which everyone should. What kind of grade would you give it 11 months after the pick, 1 year in?
Well, let's see. Let me refresh my memory. Jalen Carter was in that draft, right?
Nolan Smith, Sidney Brown,
Tyler Steen,
Keely Ringo,
Tanner McKee, Moro Ajomo.
Pickett to get Tanner back to his third position, which tells you a little something. But Moro Ajomo is the last one. What do you give the grade for that draft?
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, I give it. I'm probably going to give it an A. Still,
are you kidding me?
I think Jalen Carter he was a Rookie of the Year candidate. I mean, maybe he should have won it. How many of those have the Eagles had? 0. That to me makes it an A. Then you throw in a Nolan Smith, who I think can become, a good pass rusher. We'll see in year 2. And again, this is why it's hard to do this, because I think Moro Ajomo has the ability to perhaps step up into a little bit of more of a role than he had as a rookie. I like Tanner McKee as a cost-effective quarterback. Keely Ringo they like as a cornerback. He really struggled in the summer, and I thought that was kind of a bust.
Yeah,
of a
he
pick.
did.
But he
looked really good. I loved Keely Ringo.
Yeah, and he's really good on special teams. And then Sidney Brown, I think, is one of their safeties of the future in the third round. Tyler Steen could become, the super reserve player. So I like the picks, and there's really nothing that they have shown me so far.
But by the way, I'm with Ed on the Jalen Carter hate. Like, he was second in the defensive rookie of the year. I mean, I get it. He set such a high bar early. And he tailed off, but I mean, he's a great player. And when you're the second best rookie, and I think he should have won as well, to be honest, I think he was still the Rookie of the Year. Should have been, but Will Anderson run it. He's a very good player as well. Mm-hmm. Either way, number 2 is pretty good. I think he's going to be an all-pro player, John, if he stays, out of trouble off
Right.
the field.
I was just
You
going to
always have
say,
to put
yeah.
that caveat on it. Nolan Smith, look, disappointment. Hopefully he gets stronger. Hopefully the procedure he had on the shoulder fixes that up, and who knows. Tyler Steen, like I said, I'm a little bit worried about because the Eagles seem a little bit cautious with him. I think Sidney Brown was great. You know, he tore his ACL, though, in week 18. But they've made a lot of advancements. I talk about this all the time when it comes to ACLs. It used to be a year long. Now it's 9 months, and he should be back right at week 1, early in the season. He's very young. Those are the guys that can get over ACLs pretty quickly. Landon Dickerson had 2 ACLs in college. He just got an $84 million contract. It's not a death sentence. I think he's got tremendous potential. And Kaylee Ringo, I think, has tremendous potential. I'm not giving him an A, but it's a solid B. B plus at this standpoint, I would say.
All right, I'm going to go opposite to both of you guys, and feel free to stream out any of you guys who only want to hear Eagle positively, because
rare you get that from me.
Eddie's check is already in the mail. And holy shit. This is a C- draft for me.
Ooh,
you
C-.
go spin any way you want.
That's way too large.
The defensive tackle was phenomenal for 8 games. Went completely backwards. Compares first half to his second half. Which is more memorable? The second half. That's the way we always look at things. You remember what happened most recently. So we're a half a season removed from their number 9 pick in the draft being a dominant player who looks like he could be an all-pro. Their second first-round pick couldn't get on the field, and all they keep doing is adding defensive ends. They talk them up a blue streak, but all they do is just keep adding defensive end. If they really thought Nolan Smith would play, then they wouldn't have made their highest off-season acquisition a pass rush specialist. Sidney Brown, I cut him some slack because they played him out of position. They asked him to go play slot corner. That's just ridiculous. That's more on the coaching staff than on Sidney Brown. But Sidney Brown got burnt a lot. He made a couple of plays. He's one of those playmaking type guys who will make plays. But overall, Sidney Brown helped the defense. The defense sucked, and Sidney was part of that. Tyler Steen, like John just said, closest Nick Sirianni's ever coming to say, yeah, he's not ready to play. By the way he described him, he was picked before Sidney Brown. He was the Eagles' 3rd pick, and they're desperate to go out and continue to build the offensive line. Tanner McKee, they went and got a quarterback that they can pay for cheap the next 2 years. So when are they actually going to make a call on Tanner McKee if he can be the 2nd-string quarterback?
Well,
3 years into his 4 years of being drafted.
I mean, what are we talking about? Tanner McKee's a 6th-round pick. I mean,
I think he was a 6th-round pick. You count them all, John. Yes, you decrease the importance as you go, but Nolan Smith was a 1st-round pick. How did he perform as a 1st-round pick?
Nolan Smith, to me, is fair. To have concerns about Nolan Smith.
I don't. I think it was a matter of opportunity, and he had the shoulder thing, and still trying to figure it out. But that defensive staff was kind of in turmoil too. So you got to give some of these players a little bit of a pass. And Will Anderson won the Rookie of the Year because he had a better second half, but his first half was terrible. He didn't have a great first half. Jalen Carter had the great first half, tailed off in the second half. But why? What are the reasons? Look at the coaching staff. That to me is a reason as well. So, you can spin it any way you want. In fact, I have a glass here, Jody. Is that half full or half empty? I don't know. I'm thinking you're thinking it's half empty.
I'm a quarter empty. I'm a 3/4 empty on the Eagle draft. It just wasn't that good. Sorry, Howie. And I know. Hey, I'm here. I'm rooting. Jalen Carter plays 17 great games next year instead of 7. If he does, guess what? That bumps the grade up. Nolan Smith actually does get into games and gets 6 or 7 sacks. Boom. That's I'm open-minded. I'm not writing it off like, oh my God, how he screwed the Eagles for years. There's still a lot of question marks, but what I saw through 1 year of action, nothing wowed me except the first 7 games of Jalen Carter.
How about Sidney Brown? How about that 97-yard interception return he had against, who was that, against the Cardinals, I think, late in the season?
Yeah.
That looked like it should have won the game, but, of course, the Eagles blew it because their defense kind of let down again. But, yeah, Sidney Brown, electric player, makes tackles. And again, you can't overlook the special teams end of this. And I could say the same thing. I'm giving him an A now, but if Jalen Carter comes out next year and has 2 sacks and plays 12 games, that grade's going to go down. Same with Nolan Smith. If he doesn't step up into a role, and what's that role going to be this year? You're right. They added Huff. Looks like they might bring Reddick back. His future is still undetermined, but where's he going to play? They love Zach Bond. Apparently they look at him as, possibly
Andrew Van Ginkel,
Andrew Van Ginkel type.
Yeah.
So what's Smith's role going to look like? I think you have to look at Fangio, and I think he's going to find a role for Nolan Smith, and I think Smith will have a good season. But you're right. If I looked at things that way, if that next year things don't break the way I think they will, then I'll lower my grade. Right now, I'm giving it an A.
You're half full. I'm half empty. That's a difference.
I'm in the middle.
Half full, buddy. Half full.
I'm steady Eddie, right in the middle.
You're still projecting. I'm cut and dry. I look at what he did the first.
Well, I don't know how you can be upset about getting Jalen Carter. At worst case, second best defensive rookie in the NFL. I mean, and from a literal sense, I mean that's got to be an A for that particular pick. Everything else, I
can't give him an A
for that pick.
When you're an A+ for the first 7 games, and you're at best B- for the second, that's not an A. That's a B.
Then you're a very hard grader, and you're not giving out A's because the only A you can give out is to Will Anderson. Then, and if you give out an A to Will Anderson, everybody else in your class is stupid. Because you're not giving out any A's, because that's the only guy you can argue is better than Jalen Carter as a defensive rookie last year. So from that standpoint,
for me to go A+, a guy need to be Aaron Donald as a rookie to go A+. Neither one of those guys.
Well, I said A. I'm grading in his class.
First you said A+, then you backed it off to A.
No, I said A.
You said A+. You said A+.
Let's go to the video.
Xander, go to the video. I said A. I'm very confident, like Jeffrey Lurie and tampering charges. I'm very confident in what I said. I said A, but it doesn't matter. I'm grading him against his class. And I think he's the best player, but if he's number 2, and I have to accept that from a literal standpoint, that's still an A. Now, everybody else, there's some concerns. I like the upside of Sidney Brown. I like the upside of Kaylee Ringo, specifically those 2 players. Nolan Smith might be the linchpin because he's got to be better. And hopefully he's one of those guys that has to get in an NFL weight room and he fixed his shoulder and maybe shows up with 10, 15 more pounds. And he's a completely different player and we're having a different discussion. Yeah. At Kracz, make sure you follow Ed on Twitter. X does a tremendous job there. You mentioned Hassan Reddick. April 1st is looming. We talked about him earlier in the show. I'll end it there with you. I think it's looking more likely he'll be back than he'll be gone. Where are you right now? Back, traded, cut?
I don't think they're going to cut him. I'd be very surprised if they cut a 4-time double-digit sack maker like Hassan Reddick. So that leaves me the trade option or the bring back option. And listen, there's not a lot of space now on this defensive, on the edge here. The way they've built this team here in the offseason is they expected Reddick to be gone. And the reason he's not is the matter of compensation. You look at the way some of these trades have gone down. L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans. It was, kind of a song and a dance that they were able to just send off to Kansas City. So what are you going to get for Hassan Reddick? Howie wants a 2. He's not going to get that.
He wants a 2 for everybody.
Yeah, but you might have to settle for a 3, and I'm not sure a team's going to give that up. Teams already have made their moves in free agency. They've done what they've done. The draft is coming. Teams are getting ready for the draft. I could see maybe a draft night deal for Reddick getting done, but you're probably not going to get compensation until next year for him in the draft, which is fine. But I still think they're going to trade him. It's such a strange situation. I mean, he's still under contract. So if they don't find a trade partner, he's coming back. They're not going to cut him. But I think someone will bite on Hassan Reddick for a 3rd-round pick here in the next few weeks. I do. I just think that's the way the Eagles are kind of expecting it to go, and I think that's the way it will go.
All right. Last thing, we'll double down on Hassan. If they can't get a trade done, if Hassan and his agent dig their heels in and go in $25 million per, and Eagles just think he's not worth that, how ugly could it be when training camp opens up and Hassan's got the hammy and he's got the egg, and he, as John McMullen suggested he do last year, holding in on the Philadelphia Eagles? How big a problem is that going to be in the locker room?
Yeah, it'll be a distraction, no question about it. But, you know, they'll move past it. They'll have to move past it. And you could see something like that happening, except I don't think Hassan's that big of a troublemaker. He loves playing for the Eagles, grew up rooting for the Eagles. I think that counts. I think that matters to him. I think he's a professional player. And I don't think he'll pull those kind of stunts. But if he does, it would be a distraction, clearly.
That's something that you guys will have to deal with in August. Always a pleasure, Ed Kracz. Enjoy your wrestling weekend. Thanks for hopping on with us today.
Thanks, guys. Have a good
Thanks,
good
Ed.
weekend.
Appreciate it.
Eddie Kracz, SI, here with us on Birds 365. All right, quickie timeout. Come back. We'll put a bow on the week for you here on Birds 365.